Welcome back to another Q&A. It's been a while and these still won't be regular, but this one's for my classic audience who truly enjoys them. So drop your best questions in the comments section, and this time I'll actually turn the top like ones into dedicated longs. I'm building a list, so ask away and let's get started. As a person with long femurs, I can't comfortably back squat, so I opt for using front squats. Should I stick with front squats or try to find a way to tolerate back squats? I think everyone can technically tolerate back squats. Many powerlifters clearly aren't built for back squatting, yet still achieve elite totals with respectable squats. I'm talking about hitting 5 to 6 plates for 1 rep max, and they're natural. So how bad do you want it? The excuse, "I'm not built for squats," is pure cope. Especially since hacks like low bar exist and accommodate different body types. With low bar squats, your torso leans forward, thus matching your leverages. Now, if your argument is about maximizing quad bias rather than becoming a posterior chain dominant squatter, then that's an entirely different discussion. Specifically, in a bodybuilding context, I completely understand and accept that perspective, especially if your goal is building huge quads. But claiming I can't back squat because I have long femurs is inaccurate. For example, just look at Ivan Juric. He's clearly not built for squats, but is almost on day 2000 of squatting every day. Another example is Zach Tellender, the Olympic weightlifter. Despite being very tall with horrific leverages, like it makes you wonder why he even chose this sport, he still squatted 4 plates for over 10 reps with a 500-pound ATG high bar squat. So if he could do it and argued for squatting despite his bad leverages, and chances are you don't have his build, then who are you? Who are most of the people who say, "Oh, I can't squat"? That said, if you're not into strength sports, front squats are indeed a fine alternative. So I won't knock you for making the switch, as recent data indicates no significant differences in quad activation between back squats and front squats. Now, some influencers interpreted this to mean front squats offer no advantages over high bar squats, but my interpretation differs. This research actually dismisses the common excuse that your upper back, stability, or bracing limits front squat effectiveness. Even though front squats require more thoracic extension, the quads get stimulated just the same, likely due to worsened leverages. Also, since front squats feature lighter loads, they have a superior stimulus to fatigue ratio. For example, if you're back squatting 315 for reps, but can get the same quad stimulus using just 225 or 250 on front squats, isn't that good for hypertrophy? So front squats feel better for your build, allowing an upright torso and greater knee travel. I can't say anything bad about them, even if I don't do them. They should also make us reconsider common beliefs about stability and muscle growth, but that's another discussion altogether. That said, the most important adjustment I recommend, regardless of leverages, is wearing squat shoes with aggressive heel elevation. Even someone like me who has good squat leverages always uses squat shoes. Consider this N1 education graph showing improved tibial angles. Someone previously not built for squats suddenly demonstrates excellent quad bias. For most lifters, squat shoes solve the leverage problem. Only those with really bad leverages might still excessively lean forward. But for the vast majority, high bar or front squats combined with squat shoes will be highly effective. And by the way, if you want to do front squats but lack the necessary mobility, I highly recommend using the SSB, so the safety squat bar. This mimics front squat mechanics, and by flipping the bar backward, the camber pulls down on your upper back, forcing greater thoracic extension, thus closely replicating the original front squat pattern. With this setup, your knees naturally move forward first, preventing excessive forward lean at the torso and promoting a high chest up, elbows up position. You can also do Hatfield squats with the SSB, where you hold on to the weight pegs at roughly a belly button height. That's what I'm doing these days. This way, every single lifter can squat like a Chinese weightlifter. With perfect leverages, 0 good morning squat, and you'll easily maintain a 100% upright torso while achieving perfect ATG depth without excessive back stress. This trashes the legs like nothing else, equalizing leverages for all builds and eliminating the good morning squat once and for all. I truly believe it's a superior bodybuilding squat, so definitely try it out. But yeah, those are your options. You don't have to give up all back squats. Can upright rows be a good replacement for lateral raises? I've been stuck at the same weight and reps on laterals, and I'm considering switching to upright rows. They could be, but I think upright rows work best when combined with lateral raises, which might help break through plateaus. See, the upright row is one of the few compound movements that directly targets the lateral delts, of course with some trap in there. So I can do upright rows with 100 pounds, whereas my cheat lateral raises require 55 pounds per hand, involving some momentum. With upright rows, I don't need to use momentum, or at least as much, since it's not pure isolation. However, the effective load on the side delts at the top, with elbows elevated, is still comparable. And because upright rows naturally shorten the lever arm, they closely mimic the bent arm position seen on machine lateral raises. The position at the peak of an upright row is essentially identical, offering strong progressive overload potential, which will inevitably carry over to lateral raises. For this reason alone, I believe they're worth including. Personally, I feel upright rows will be the key to unlocking new lateral delt gains for myself. So my current routine consists of upright rows, dumbbell cheat lateral raises, straight cable lateral raises, and behind neck presses. A combination I'd call the holy grail for building 3D delts naturally. Another point worth mentioning is that it's normal for lateral raises to feel stuck. It's a notoriously slow progressing exercise. Even a slight increase in weight, say from 30 to 35 pounds, can significantly reduce your rep count and incentivizes more cheating. You might drop from 12 reps down to 6, effectively halving your reps. This unusual scaling is why many lifters avoid low rep lateral raises. Of course, low reps can still be equally effective, which is a topic of recent debate, but realistically, you'd have to microload the movement. This especially applies to cable lateral raises. Moving just one pin down might be too heavy and drastically drop your reps into an unworkable rep zone. I've personally experienced this. And so simply adding a 2.5 pound plate, sometimes even a 1.5 pound plate, if you can get those, puts you back in the ideal rep range. Now, if using regular dumbbells, well, microloading can be challenging unless you have magnetic microplates that you'll bring to the gym. But of course, adjustable dumbbells are the easiest to maneuver here. With cables, however, it's easy. Simply add a small plate to the pin and you can effectively continue progressing with low reps. Now, if microloading is not an option, your best bet is probably increasing the reps. So if you're typically doing sets of 8 to 12, consider pushing into the 15 to 20 rep range, ensuring each set reaches failure. So here you're probably never need more than 20 or 30 pounds. You'll be in that zone. But if you ever decide to go heavy one day, you'll automatically be 40 and beyond for lower reps. So this kind of reminds me of chest expander progression. Once you comfortably hit higher reps, moving up a spring will naturally place you back in a workable rep range. I know because I can do 2 super springs and 2 regular springs, but the moment I try 3 super springs, I can't even do it for 1 rep. So the only way for me to do that is I have to get my reps from 8 all the way up to 15, and then I'll be able to get it as a 1 rep max. It's just how it is. Some movements don't scale well. So get those +1s in, master the weight, and your upright rows will naturally complement that progression. Now, one more note about upright rows. They're similar to face pulls in how they target the delts and traps. So personally, I prefer doing them with cables, using a rope attachment. A straight bar tends to force your wrists into an uncomfortable angle, whereas a rope naturally allows the elbows and hands to lift downwards. Also, setting the cables at a diagonal angle generally feels better than being super close to it. And it feels better on the shoulders for most people. Should I focus on being able to bench 225 first for reps before I start focusing on upper chest and incline presses? I'm going to say yes. I know I've made videos talking about how incline bench offers a deeper stretch in your chest due to the greater arm bend, and how a low incline could, on paper, better bias the upper chest without turning it into an anterior delt press. But I'll also mention this. There are plenty of novices who start their journey with incline presses, and they don't really end up with bigger chest than those who started with flat. Remember, the flat bench still works the entire chest. You must understand that when we use the term bias, it simply means you're emphasizing the area a little more, isolating the upper chest. And the way I see it, if you build your base strength like benching 2 plates for at least 4 reps, even if you never do incline presses, you'll still see noticeable upper chest growth and carry over to that lift. That's just how it works for beginners. If you spend your first year really focusing on the flat bench, you'll still be strong at all angles later on. I think beginners might be better off doing flat bench combined with vertical pressing. So I love the classic combination of bench press plus OHB. At this early stage, overhead pressing won't limit you due to stability. You can easily progress up to about a plate before your progression slows down or the movement starts to feel unstable, incentivizing higher reps. And that overhead pressing, believe it or not, will build your upper chest and establish a solid strength base which feeds into everything, especially inclines. Now, if you want another compound, I'd argue that weighted dips will probably do more for your chest, providing a super deep range of motion. Plus, dips hit the pec minor, giving you that illusion of separation in the upper chest. So honestly, I don't think anyone would go wrong by sticking with flat bench, overhead press, and weighted dips. You will build a big chest doing that. And if you really want to do inclines, then be my guest, but it's not necessary right now. It's not in my novice program, but if I were to include it, I would definitely replace the close grip bench with close grip incline. But that's about it. It wouldn't be my main movement. Still, it won't magically mean that by starting your lifting journey with inclines, your upper chest will end up significantly bigger than someone who started with flat. It just doesn't work like that. And in the end, it won't matter provided you eventually do include inclines. Once your newbie gains are over, it's fair game, so it's up to you. But I'll be honest, I constantly see skinny guys living on the incline bench and they still don't have anything going on in their upper chest. That area takes years to truly develop, so stop trying to specialize when everything is still weak and underdeveloped. It's the same mentality I see with guys obsessing about lower lats when they don't have any lats to begin with. So one more thing, if you're doing a chest day or a push workout, I'd open with flat and do incline secondarily, not the other way around, until you have some decent chest mass. I do think the flipping idea is overrated for novice lifters. I think I only made this switch 3 years ago, and even then, it's still not my default. And at some point, if you have a strong incline press, it doesn't matter where you really order it. What's the equivalent to 225 bench with weighted dips? It's very individualized, but that mostly correlates when you're already a strong bencher. For example, I've done a 255 dip into 180s. That totals to about 440 at the top, whereas my max bench is 405. So my dip total weight slightly exceeds my bench. If we scale this down, roughly 20 kilograms, so 45 pounds less than your total dipping weight, is what will represent your bench press capability. For example, say you weigh 165 pounds. Technically, dipping 60 pounds would imply you can bench 225. But realistically, I rarely see that happen. Now, if you're dipping 2 plates, which is 90 pounds, that makes more sense and aligns better with this standard. And that's what we do see in the real world. So generally speaking, if you're at a lean, moderate body weight, let's say between 165 and 181, so I like to reference the common powerlifting weight classes for simplicity, and you can dip 2 plates for about 5 to 8 clean reps with good range of motion, controlled negatives, and even pausing at the bottom, you should comfortably bench 2 plates for some reps. Personally, when I first started lifting, I was already dipping a plate because I trained at the park with a backpack, and my bench was around my body weight. Now, by the time my bench reached 2 plates, which only took 8 months, my dip was also at 2 plates. And that's how things scaled for me. At 3 plates on dips for 5 reps, my bench was 275 for 5. And with 4 plates on dips for the same reps, I was benching 350-ish. Then a 5-plate dip brought my bench above 365, and eventually doing 5 plates for 5 reps or 4 plates for 12 reps was equal to a 405 bench. So the scaling actually intensified as I got stronger, and my total dipping weight moved closer to my bench 1 rep max. On average though, I'd say a 2-plate dip at a moderate body weight generally equates to around the 225 bench. And keep in mind, this also assumes you're benching with your dips for specificity and better carryover. Of course, some guys will naturally have a strong bench without ever doing it whatsoever. We've seen this in the streetlifting world, but your experience may vary depending on individual structure and leverages. Hey Alex, what would be your approach to OHB specialization? I want to hit a 225 OHB, 1 rep max within the next 4 months. Well, let me first break some news to you. It might take longer than 4 months. If you're overhead pressing, say 200 pounds, which on paper isn't that far off, realistically, it might take at least a year or longer. The OHB is one of the most frustrating and slow moving lifts. Once you're pressing beyond your body weight, anywhere in the range of 1 to 1.2 times, it gets really tough, especially if you're natural and don't have crazy good leverages. From what I've seen, most lifters plateau in this exact zone, 205 to 225. Sometimes they'll progress a bit further, maybe up to 240, and then the gains completely stall unless they truly specialize. You generally tend to tap out there. So expecting significant improvements within 4 months is not very realistic unless you've never trained the OHB seriously or peaked properly. But here's what I'd say. For the highest odds of success, you must treat the OHB like it's your primary competition lift. Imagine if OHB instead of bench press was the main lift in powerlifting. You train it accordingly. So given that it's a vertical pressing pattern, you get the best carryover from accessories that closely mimic the vertical pressing pattern and muscles involved. This means you want to limit your flat bench work, perhaps with the exception of the close grip bench, since it actually does have good carryover given a similar arm path with tucked elbows, close grip, and heavily targeting the anterior delts. It also helps with the mid to lockout strength, which is crucial for overhead pressing. And strongmen have known this for a long time, that close grip bench has good carryover to the OHB. But even more relevant would be higher incline pressing. So you always have to ask compared to what, right? So specifically the anterior delt press, which is around a 75 to 80 degree incline, will allow you to lift slightly heavier than your strict OHB, providing practical overload. And then from there, you can move one notch lower to about 60 degrees, offering another 10% overload, or sometimes equal to your anterior delt press, depending on your build and weaknesses. So basically, you want to stick to primarily 3 angles. 100% vertical, which is going to be your standing overhead press or seated without back support or even behind the neck. 75 to 80 degrees, the AD press, and around 60 degrees, which is the highest incline you can do. Once you drop to around 45 degrees or less, you're shifting closer to flat bench specificity. Although the 45 degree press can still be very useful for many people, myself included. Now for me, since I'm a conjugate guy, I rotate variations across these angles. Most of the time, I suggest doing a standing overhead press or something fully vertical, but eventually you'll run out of variations. Plus, your accessory work can't be purely vertical. So to wrap up, here's how I'd structure it. Start your workout with a max effort overhead press variation. You can use bands, chains, pins, even a Swiss bar, get creative. Followed by some back-off sets, like 3 sets of 10 at around 65 to 70%. After that, pick another pressing movement at one of the angles I mentioned earlier, preferably with a barbell for the best carryover. I found that dumbbells aren't as good. And then do 2 sets of 5 to 8 reps. Then for isolation work, get more volume into your delts. Do not neglect them. Just like someone would do the chest crusher or dumbbell fly to build the pecs on a deep bench press, getting that stretch, you should also add loo raises and pull aparts. The loo raise is especially specific to the overhead press, and the pull apart is going to help your behind the neck pressing. And it just bulletproofs the shoulders, works the triceps as well. It's just, these are the 2 lifts I would include. Some guys would even argue front raises, but I have no experience with that. So the max effort method should be rotated every week, and everything that comes after that, every 3 to 8 weeks. Thoughts on a 200 calorie surplus for lean bulking? On paper, it's going to work just fine. In practice, well, have fun. So could you achieve similar gains compared to more aggressive bulking? Yes, there's nothing wrong with this. The only caveat is that you'll have to track everything meticulously. And let's be honest, most guys simply don't like doing that during a bulk. Typically, they love bulking because it allows them to relax, enjoy their lives, and eat freely without obsessing about portion control. So if they gain an extra pound or two of fat per month, it's no big deal. So I'm just speaking realistically about the human experience. I have a lot of experience with bulking. And when I'm bulking, I personally don't count calories. Just telling you like it is. I know it's the wrong way to do it, but I couldn't tell you exactly how many calories I eat. I just know that it's high, probably in the 4,000s or at least the high 3,000s. So instead, I rely on the scale for feedback, for the speed of weight gain. If I'm gaining a pound every other week, I'm good. Now with a tracked 200 calorie surplus, your weight gains will be slower but precise. There won't be weird fluctuations week to week, which could happen if you're just basing this off appetite and a bit of portion control. And so you have better control. Like if you put this in a chart, you'll be able to see your weight trending upwards in a reasonable way. You won't get too fat. So it is better if you're not in tune with your body. Now, I won't tell you how to bulk, but consider how it feels when you're shredded. You carefully count every macro and calorie, staying in that perfect deficit. Do you really want to repeat that experience, but in reverse? If you genuinely want to apply that level of precision during a bulk, then be my guest. But from personal experience, I can tell you that it's not fun. When bulking, you're naturally hungry, and you typically just want to eat and enjoy food without stressing. Let it fuel your training. Screw it. So I don't have many other thoughts beyond that. It is a smart option after all. I'm just saying that in the real world, most guys tend to break under such strict conditions. Not that it can't be done. This way is typically reserved for the ultra-disciplined or elite natural bodybuilders who want to limit unnecessary weight gain, so they don't have to suffer as much through longer cuts later, because longer cuts also suck. And actually, if you just finish a cut and you've been counting calories the whole time, well, now you can count in reverse, and that makes more sense. If you weren't in a dieting phase earlier, then it kind of sucks. So if your goal is to avoid extensive cutting, this method is a great choice. Losing 15 pounds of body fat would be really fast compared to losing double or triple that amount, which often happens with more aggressive bulking. With that said, if I ever decide to bulk again, which I'm considering stopping since my gains are slowing down a lot and I want to prioritize long-term health more, I'd probably do this. A very small surplus with clear weight caps and mini cuts. Like, I don't think I should ever weigh more than 170 pounds again. Anyway, do whatever helps you stay consistent with your diet. That's my advice. Down workouts with weights, like 15 down push-ups with 20 kilos on your back. How would you go about programming this? I actually think it's a great idea because you're less likely to suffer from overuse. The thing is, when the starting number for down workouts gets high, the initial sets become less realistic. You can gas out fast unless your work capacity is insane. For example, if you're doing a 30 down dip workout, doing 30 dips in one set alone is tough for most people. Then, replicating the same level of explosiveness and fatigue resistance for 29 reps shortly after is even harder. From my experience, most guys end up resting longer between those initial sets until the reps become more manageable. Personally, in a 30 down dip workout, the first 5 or 10 sets are the hardest. You just have to rest more. Or else you hit failure way too early, and that's not what you want. Ideally, you should hit failure towards the middle or end of the workout, not right at the start. This pattern especially happens with certain exercises like dips or push-ups. So doing 40 down push-ups, bro, that's brutal. And just hitting 40 in one go is already hard for a lot of guys, but then you still gotta do 39, 38, and so on, which is where the real fatigue kicks in. So it's not the first set, it's the first few sets after that mess you up. That's why higher rep down workouts become less effective. I found the ideal range should be around 15 to 20 down. Those were my most productive workouts. And doing these exercises with a weighted vest puts you perfectly in the zone, meaning you'll achieve ideal volume without needing hundreds of reps, saving time and reducing the risk of overuse injuries, especially if you're training this way often. Another little hack, if you use down workouts as finishers at the end of your session, you often won't need extra weight at all because you're already fatigued. For example, in my own workouts, I sometimes end push workouts with body weight only decline diamond push-ups, but I only do 15 down. It's not a huge number of total reps, but since I'm already tired and this variation is harder, I don't need to load or accumulate endless reps. Since the resistance curve of pull-ups is most difficult at the top, pulling explosively at the bottom to fly through the top with momentum can be effective. Does this mean that dynamic effort of doing unweighted or lightly weighted explosive pull-ups has carryover to weighted pull-ups when they're maxed by developing explosivity? Yes, it does. You're observant. In general, the dynamic effort method works even better for calisthenics than powerlifting because many bodyweight exercises are naturally more explosive. Like, just think about how this applies to the muscle up. Doing dynamic effort pull-ups can significantly boost your starting strength from the bottom position. You can even do dynamic effort muscle ups without bands or chains, which makes for a hard workout in itself. So the dynamic effort method, being high sets, low reps, pairs perfectly well with movements that are inherently explosive. And of course, calisthenics fits this perfectly. I've personally included this for a long time on pull-ups, though I typically don't label it as dynamic effort. I just like doing a lot of sets of 5. So I'll typically go weighted or sometimes body weight, and I'll do 10 to 20 sets of 5 reps with max a minute of rest. Basically, the Arnold 50. And yes, 50 to 100 total reps is that sweet spot. So it's a fantastic workout, either as a warm-up or as a finisher, or even by itself for pure calisthenics athletes. And here's a fun fact. During the last 2 months of my bench press specialization, that's basically what I mostly did for my back. For legs, I did the absolute minimum, 1 set of breathing squats and 1 to 2 sets of good mornings. And for my back, I did 10 to 20 sets of pull-ups, rotating grips each set. Wide, medium, and close grip. Anyway, I love high sets and low reps on pull-ups. Always have and highly recommend it. It works better than doing a bunch of sets of 10. It's also an effective cure for golfer's elbow, driving in the inflammatory healing cascade. So yes, I fully approve. And my calisthenics program will indeed feature the dynamic effort method. Resistance bands as good as chest expanders? No, because you're going to lack progressive overload potential. The best you could do with bands is quadruple them to shorten the length, allowing you to perform your typical movements with resistance at the start. But even then, you'll still end up doing higher reps. And if you try using thicker bands, the strength curve will feel completely off. I discussed this in my expander video. There's a specific reason why expanders have maintained those particular dimensions, such as the handle distance and the exact thickness and length of the springs. The Bronze Era GOATs figured out the ideal sizing needed to gradually add springs while staying in a reasonable rep range. So the main application I see for bands is as a warm-up. Like if your expander is already loaded with several springs and you don't want to remove them, bands can be used instead. So start with micro minis, then move up to minis, and then proceed immediately into your heavier sets. This is how I use them, or for active recovery. Never heavy sets with thick bands. Finally, bands can be useful if you're very weak at pull-apart movements, or if you're just trying to get accustomed to the movement pattern. Just keep in mind that you'll likely be doing higher reps, around 15 to 20. But again, there's truly nothing like having a good steel handle and a device specifically designed for these unique exercises. And anyone who gets serious about this type of training will eventually invest in a proper expander. I'm just saying. Bands can only take you so far. Eventually, you will want the real deal. Thoughts on benching to the neck for more range of motion? You're talking about the good old guillotine bench press. In the past, everyone would have told you this was a one-way ticket to Snap City. That is dangerous, and you're eventually going to destroy your rotator cuffs. But as we've learned more about pain management and injury prevention, it's been shown that there's no inherently dangerous exercise. However, we can say some movements do carry inherently greater risk. That's an important distinction. I'm not one of those guys who claims every movement is equally safe. Some exercises clearly have a worse risk-reward ratio, let's be honest. But do I think benching to the neck is bad? No. It can actually be a great option if you don't have access to a camber bar. But again, you have to ask yourself, compared to what? Are there other movements that provide more arm bend and range of motion without stressing your shoulders as much? Absolutely. Like deficit push-ups, weighted dips, which can still be tough on the shoulders, but still less than a guillotine press, and especially low incline bench presses. These are all good examples. And to keep it real, if you mainly care about getting a deeper arm bend and not specifically targeting the upper chest, although this will do it too, benching at a 15-degree incline, just the lowest setting possible, or placing a small mat underneath you, can provide the same benefits as a guillotine bench, but allows you to bring the bar lower on your chest which feels more comfortable on the shoulders and carries less injury risk. But if you still want to press the neck, understand that it can bias your chest a bit more, and it is a very effective lift. See, when you rotate your upper arm outward, the clavicular fibers align better with it. Also, you're getting a weighted stretch with extended range of motion. It's a couple inches more, as opposed to the sternum, which is a lot higher than bringing to your neck, right? Just make sure you have safety pins established. So I'd recommend experimenting with different grips for comfort. A close grip will target more triceps and resemble a jam press. So ideally, you want your arms aligned properly without any weird corkscrewing at the elbows. Like, you should be able to stay flared the whole time and really cyborg this lift. In my opinion, most lifters won't ever need to exceed 225. So staying lighter and focusing on slow tempo is better. Lower the weight slowly, 3 to 5 seconds. Pause at the bottom for 1 to 2 seconds. Then ease out the force without exploding upward. Minimize those peak forces to make the guillotine press an excellent mass builder without being afraid of the exercise. Always 72 hours between sessions, regardless of beginner, intermediate, advanced, regardless of calisthenics or barbells. Thoughts on full body Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Do you prefer full body only twice a week? First of all, I completely reject the idea of always 72 hours. I despise those definitive terms like you should only do these exercises or reductionist training ideologies. Even if I agree with the concept most of the time, the word always is a very dangerous word. Although there's always more nuance and flexibility than you realize. And even though 72 hours is absolutely my preferred rule, it's still not perfect. Just to say, during my recent 405 bench journey, I was benching every 5 days, not every 72 hours. Now, my other body parts followed the 72-hour law, but not the bench, which allowed for constant max effort days with 0 volume days, while never having recovery problems, especially for the shoulders. So this was like my new double max effort substitute. I will also add, the more frequently you train, the greater the risk of programming errors. Generally speaking, the only lifters who rarely mess this up are novices who recover perfectly no matter what, and typically benefit the most from full body workouts 3 times a week. And of course, there's the experienced lifters who spent years studying this information, plus they experimented with higher frequencies and mastered their own recoverability. So that begs a question. Who suffers the most from training every 40 hours? Crazy enough, it's intermediate lifters, which, let's be honest, makes up the second largest portion of trainees. Intermediates often overestimate their programming skills. They modify well-established programs by adding unnecessary exercises and usually introduce common mistakes that hurt recovery. So I'd say more often than not, these changes backfire on 3 times a week or more frequency. So I do believe that most intermediates would feel better and recover better by training every 72 hours. I'm telling you, that extra day makes all the difference. And again, nobody struggles to build muscle by training a muscle twice a week. That's also well established. Now, I don't want to label this as the optimal frequency, but it is the most feasible choice for most lifters. When you increase frequency to 3 or more times a week, even with equating volumes, there's more room to mess things up. That's just how it is. On paper, sure, it might be marginally superior. And in the end, it does add up. And regarding the argument that doing 1 set 3 times a week is superior, think about how absolute load also plays into that. For example, if you're strong, even 1 heavy set done 3 times a week might be too hard to recover from. In my case, if I bench 315 for 1 set of 10, I still can't fully recover in 48 hours. I just can't, bro. I need the full 72 hours. And keep in mind, that's probably not the only exercise I'm doing in that session. So even if the total volume is very low, let's say 4 sets or less, I still wouldn't recover enough to bench again on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I've tried. That's why 48-hour frequencies get tricky depending on experience levels. It's not foolproof. That's why my naturally enhanced program is twice a week full body. You can't mess it up. And I speak for the masses. You always have perfect recovery. And to this day, nothing has surpassed it in terms of recovery reliability. So 72 hours between strenuous workouts aligns with the old Soviet literature, as well as proven systems like Westside. 72 hours gives your nervous system sufficient recovery, allows muscle damage to dissipate enough, and ensures you hit your muscles twice per week, which no one is struggling to get gains with. So I default to 72 hours as a general rule. But again, it is not absolute. Some muscles might handle 48 hours just fine. You have to experiment to see what works for you. And on the extreme end, sometimes even 72 hours is not enough. You might need 96 hours or more, depending on training intensity and training age. All right, last question. Alex and everyone else with a similar experience, how do you cope with strength loss on a cut? You have to accept that it's going to happen. And this applies mostly to movements that heavily depend on leverages, specifically the bench press and barbell back squat. If you understand that you're weaker mainly because you're less thick and thus have less rebound, and your body hasn't fully adapted to the worsened movement pattern or ranges of motion, since there's still a coordination component involved, it should be reassuring that once your weight stabilizes, your strength rapidly returns. This is exactly what we see after most cuts. Even without regaining body weight, within 2 or 3 months tops, you regain most of your previous strength, resulting in better pound for pound strength overall. Basically, right after finishing a cut, you're at your weakest. Obviously, you're in a deficit for months, completely depleted. But as soon as you relearn the movement pattern with your new body weight and find your groove again, your strength shoots right back up. You've seen this happen with me every single time. And if you follow that with a caloric surplus, you can experience almost a sort of super compensation. That's partly where the misconception about rapidly gaining strength comes from. You've adapted neurologically, and now you're also recovering some of those leverage advantages, plus benefiting from the surplus calories, more energy, and increased muscle glycogen. But generally speaking, it's primarily certain compounds that decrease on a cut, while many other lifts may not suffer as much. Like arm isolations can often hold steady or even increase on a cut. So exercises that have identical movement patterns from beginner to advanced levels tend to maintain better strength. For example, belt squats have less leverage variables. You're locked into the machine, there's no axial loading, and no good morning action. Either your legs are strong or they're not. So you find that you don't lose strength like a barbell back squat, especially since you can't push off your gut. And then you got calisthenics, another great option. If you shift your training towards body weight exercises, you might even see a performance increase, which can be highly motivating. Lastly, introducing new exercises can help you get stronger for months despite being in a calorie deficit. That's because neural adaptations often mask temporary strength loss from dieting. So basically, here's what I recommend. 1, favor exercises that aren't heavily leverage dependent. 2, evaluate the rest of your program. Check if your isolation and accessory lifts are staying strong. Most of the time, they won't decline as much as you expect. If they do, it might indicate a programming issue. And 3, introduce motivating bodyweight exercises and create some novelty for new neural adaptations. Doing this will help mitigate the perceived strength loss on a cut. And remember, once this cut ends, the strength loss is temporary. You will 100% regain your previous strength really fast. It happens every single time, so please don't worry. Trust the process. That's the coolest part. You'll look your best and be temporarily weak, but very soon your strength is going to rebound. So just shift your focus to the right things, like I described, and everything will work out fine. And that wraps up another Q&A video. Hope you enjoyed it, and drop some more questions in the comments so I can fully cover the topics you care more about. That's the plan moving forward. Of course, with more live streams and the occasional Q&A just like this. So that's it for now. I'll talk to you guys next time.